Hi, my name's Erwin, and this is the Poetry Lighthouse podcast.
Thank you.
So, talking about your new poetry collection, I would like to share two poems that you've prepared for us for this podcast, and maybe we could have a reading of one of them
Yes,
first and discuss a little bit about it.
yes, of course. I think I'm gonna read the longest. I don't think it's the longest poem in the collection, but like the longer between the two. Um, and this poem, I used some baybayin, which is a very old Filipino script. The people in the Katagalugan, which is in the central northern Philippines, they were the ones who used the script. And in the present moment, it was actually a lot of Filipinos were going back and relearning Baybayin and studying it. But it has two versions, the versions that the Spanish modified in order to represent the modern sounds, and also the more traditional version, which I've used in these poems. I want to show you how they look like, but I can't. So what I'll do is I'll just read them how they sound like. Breathe. I want to fly from the Black Country to Batangas. Rewind the honeyed scrolls of clouds to search for the fang left by a lightning strike. An amulet that will keep me alive. But there is bracken of scar flashing opalesque in my left lung. In respiratory class, we learned that the right lung is shorter because of the liver beneath, the left narrower as it shares room with the heart. But what I love, I can no longer breathe, and the cold air of my new home shreds like a quartz blue blizzard, like wolves circling their prey. My consultant warns me, keep the mucus uninfected and you can have a normal life expectancy. On my OBS rounds, I keep my middle and ring fingertips on my patient Eduardo's wrist, pretending I'm palpating his pulse when I'm tallying the rise and fall of his chest. An average person takes 8.4 million breaths a year. If we miss one, anong alaalang malilimutan? There are 600 million alveoli in the lungs. Imagine your chest like a fire opal trance, a symphony of wind-blown leaves. In CPR, I give 2 breaths for each cycle of compression. What comes out of my lung is life. What's inside is decay. A mosaic of rot, colonizing a bow, like the ruins of a war my mother speaks of in another tongue. I curl my palm into a cup, tap the lower lobes of Eduardo's back. Each seed of sweat is a point of light that reflects a different version of myself. Healer or patient, migrant or resident. Tonight, the citrine glow of clarithromycin primes his intravenous line, flashes sharp into his vein, tomorrow into mine. The hospital hallway dilates. I'm wheeling Eduardo, but we're not moving, only the mucous green walls sweeping by. I look down, and I am the patient gasping under a mask fogged with a white breath wreath of asters. In Batangas, you once wrote to me, we are gazing at the same stars, but seeing different constellations. Depending on how you read it, iibig, iikbi is to love or to sob. Baga is ember or lungs. I curl my palm into a cup, tap the lower lobes of my back. Each globule of sweat holds a different version of the Odyssey. Waiting for the oxygen sets latch on my finger like a Venus flytrap, I watch the bioluminescent blue bars pump up. I wheeze and wheeze. The voices of my consultant, my patients, my mother blur into cantatas dispersing through autumn hills. Waiting for the oxygen sets latch on Eduardo's finger, like a flytrap suffocating a lizard. I watch the bioluminescent blue bars pump up. I squeeze and squeeze salbutamol into his nebulizer, but I am the one leaning forward to suck the mouthpiece. Depending on when I face the mirror, I am healer or patient, poet or dumb. The air that is me rests in nameless trees, shifts the viscous leaves. Once you and I laid with easy lungs under the electric blue waves of kingfishers in flight. Kaibigan, kaibigan is lover or friend. Tira is reside or leftover. The most oxygen I can give without the doctor's prescription is 10 liters per minute. I can decrease it, like how I titrate the dusk by turning on the lamps, like how the gods choose who is to breathe fully and who is to beg. No other organ in the body can float in water but the lungs, because the lungs are a pair of life buoys. No other organ in the body can drown like the lungs. Salt water burn of tissue, lacerating gasps, because the lungs contain the breath of a lover, the laughter of a patient, the myths of a mother. When Zeus flooded the earth to drown the warring men, Astrea was so breathless, all she wanted was to be a star, oblivious that her own tears helped swell the flood. I refused to sob. On only this, an abrasion of wind in my rib cage, a spill of the Milky Way. A constellation blinks into mere needle pricks on my left wrist. I want to be at home in this breath, even on my death breath days, when I can find the blurred face of my mother, tornadoes of embers over our childhood campfire. Between this breath and I, God floats in a moat of pollen. My consultant gave me a diagnosis, and I want to believe the universe is just a set of coincidences, and it is a coincidence that my lungs are collapsing galaxies, and it is a coincidence that the person reading this poem is breathing fully. The hallway's throat constricts, the cup's orifice shrinks. Eduardo snips the flower in a pot for the last time. He still believes something beautiful can emerge from its own quiet tending. Live life, so we try. I can forever cannulate the tiniest veins. We can forever laugh at Kierkegaard's views on love, the camouflage of hearts, choking but alive. Pasa, pasa means to hand over or bruise. Eduardo and I were the same. The life in our lungs is going out faster than it goes in, sometimes clogged, sometimes blurred, like sea spray on the face on that once erratic boat ride. What goes out is gone. What we long for does not come back. Like that island I was willing to lose sight of, and a million miles of impossible blue sky I cannot breathe in. I cannot cross back. Thank you.
Wow, you almost got me, gonna make me tear up. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Um, the way that you describe this sort of dichotomy between breathing in and breathing out, as in life and decay, I think it was a very beautiful, universal sort of this idea of giving and then taking and how, one of the lines that really hit me was that we exhale faster than we inhale. Something, I don't know the exact wording, but I think the idea is magnificent. And you've got some very great insights I guess this is from comparing with a patient maybe. And
Mm,
so,
yeah.
and what I wanted to ask you is when it comes to the metaphor of the lungs, how does this organ, which is the lungs, which by the way, I learned a lot about the
Mm,
anatomy by reading your poem because of, the right lung is shorter and the left one it's a bit longer because of the heart and all this kind of we it completely changes my perspective on the anatomy of the humans and how amazing our anatomy is, how
mhm.
perfectly well made it is, and the alveoles and that we have, all of these concepts, all of these metaphors. What do you think? What would be your takeaway for someone who might be reading this poem in terms of the inhale and the exhale?
I think, I mean, our bodies, every organ in our bodies. I mean, to be fair, not even organs, just maybe even the tip of our nail, right? You can look at something and use that as extended metaphor, and that's the beauty of our work as artists. We look at an ordinary thing and use that in order to translate what we want to translate on the page. With regards to lungs, lungs are very important for me in terms of in this collection. I did mention that the AGIMAT, the talisman in this collection, isn't really a material pendant, or a material thing, gem or something. It's actually language. And we breathe words. We speak through breathing. We speak through our, I mean, the lungs, really. Right? Depending on how you read it, like I said in a poem, one word that's spelled the same can have completely different meanings and the total opposite. I mean, in this poem specifically, it's quite special for me because this is the only poem that I think I've written about my chronic illness, which is I have bronchiectasis, which is an abnormal widening of the lungs, and I've never really talked about it. And people will like go to me and say, "Oh, yeah, how are you able to do things? You're a nurse, and you're like, you're this person, and you're doing this, and you're also doing all your poetry, etc." And but it's important for me to, in this collection particularly, to show something vulnerable about me as well. And um, I think in order for us to be able to heal others, we have to be the wounded first. I think it's Rennie Brown who said that we should be, well, the term the wounded healer, right? And I think it's very important that I share with my readers as well, especially with my the readers who really supported you and who's still there from your first collection to now. I wanted to show that kind of vulnerability to them, that actually the healer is also the patient, right? And the poet is also the dumb. I am also that different side of aspect of a being, as like language itself. They have opposite meanings as well, or different meanings, like the lungs. The lungs, right lung and left lung, they never mirror each other. And sometimes when you think about it, especially if you're not from the medical field, it's so easy to think that they mirror each other. They're a pair of lungs, right? Even like the illustration of them, sometimes you would look at illustration of lungs and like they become a tree and they have this beautiful canopy. But actually, like the other one's a little bit trimmer and we need to trim the left lung. So there's a beautiful metaphor for me with this organ of lungs that says this is a pair of lungs, and they do pretty much the same thing. They give us the oxygen that we need, and they give us breath, and they give us language, but their functions are different. And it also, and in life, that's what it is. That's why the you in the poem, whoever this person is talking to, this you know, that line, you know, you once wrote to me that we are seeing, we are gazing at the same stars, though seeing different constellation. And I think there's a lot about what, how do we see things as well, and how do we, despite the differences, despite the opposite, how do we still become connected with each other? How do we still love each other? Even through the nursing patient relationship, you know, the speaker, myself, is a nurse, and the patient, let's say his name is Eduardo, right, is there. But, you know, she's caring for him, but at the same time, she can definitely see herself as him, literally and figuratively, because ultimately we are the same and we should be the same. So I think that the organ anatomy and physiology, it's a very interesting world of, but it's something that you also need to kind of tread on like carefully, because obviously we can't just like it's hard to let's say pick out heart and extend as an extended metaphor if you haven't really been, I wouldn't say that you haven't really like felt it. It's hard. It takes research, it takes trial and error and stuff. But at the end of the day, the world is your oyster, right? You can pick up a stone and use it as an extended metaphor. So that's my take on lungs, I guess.
No, I think you executed that metaphor in the best possible way, and you're very right in those points that you've mentioned about how, you know, everything can be a metaphor, basically, as long as you
Yeah.
know from what angle are you going to look at it, because
Yes.
everything depends on our perspective, and in a way, you kind of really takes us through a journey into the
Yeah.
air as it comes in
Mm.
and as it goes out. And I really like and appreciate this contrast that you have between the caretaker and the
Yes.
caregiver, because
Mm.
it's always, people always think that it's one way, but sometimes
Yes.
you have to, you know, consider that even if you work in the medical industry, that doesn't mean that you are excluded from all of these different illnesses, or that you can get sick. Like even if
Mm.
you're a doctor, you are susceptible of you know, falling ill. And I think
Yes.
it's very interesting to look at it from this perspective, and this vulnerability that you bring into your poem. You know, there's also a feeling of you wanting to be also taken care of, not just the fact of
Yes.
other people, um, it's not just the fact that you want to take care of others, but also saying, you know, I also suffer, so
Mm.
who's going to take care of me? And there has to be this kind of comprehension that goes not just one way, but both ways. And I
Mm.
think that just makes it very beautiful, this metaphor of the lungs.
Thank
In
you.
a way, both lungs are different, but they complement each other in the same way that
Yes.
the caregiver and the patient, they complement each other as well. So
Yes, definitely.
so beautiful, and I just loved it. There's so
I
many great I struggled a little bit with some terminology, but I really appreciate that at the end of of each of your works, you always put a sort of index of words that, you know, translated in English, so that way I was able to know a bit more about, you know, the background of these words, what they
mm,
mean, and
mhm,
everything just clicks, and it's impressive. And now that you read it, we know how it sounds as well, which is very interesting because in terms of language, you know, when you read something, you use your
mm,
breath, you use your lungs
yes,
as well. So in a way, this kind of pauses and the kind of rhythm,
mm,
when you were reading it, I just noticed how pivotal it was to take a breath. And
yes,
you know, the fact that these words, some of them sound very breathy, or some of
mm,
them sound a bit more like a bit shorter. It's very interesting to look at how language can transform our view on, you know, how we breathe, which is something we don't even think about. But
Mm,
then when we read about it, it's like you just start to get conscious of your own breath, and it's like,
mm,
I'm not breathing that much. And it's like, how many breaths do we have every year? How many alveoles do we have? How much air can we get in our lungs? All of these
mm.
questions that we just take for granted. But it's so wonderful that, when we start, being more conscious about it, you realize, oh, I haven't been breathing very well lately. Maybe I
Mm.
should, take a breath. And maybe you're anxious throughout the day and you realize, well, maybe I should take more deep breaths and take a break from work. And yeah, it's just, brings awareness.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's so easy to easy again. What I'm saying is, like, as a poet, we do write breathing as well. I mean, the line breaks is so important to us, right? Why do we break after this word? What are we trying to do here? And I think the act of breathing is so natural that sometimes we don't really think about it um, as much as we should. But when it comes to our craft, we think so much about breathing, the line breaks and, the rhythm and what kind of word are we going to use to make it sound, more musical, etc. And I think this is what I mean as well by while this book is saying something about opposites, they also complement each other. It's not only about opposite, it's also about, like, the togetherness. And the opposite, you really, I mean, I'm really grateful to you, because I feel like you've read this book so closely, because you could really see the opposites. I mean, another theme in this book, which is about Mebuyan, was the goddess of the Philippine underworld. She nurses the children of the underworld, and she has this hundreds of breasts on her body. And I use her as an extended metaphor. So again, that extended metaphor of my work as a nurse, specializing in the care of children and young people who suffer mental health conditions, especially during the pandemic. And the opposite of that is this Mebuyan, this goddess of the underworld, who's taking care of the souls of dead children of the underworld. She can't have her child, even though no matter how much she wants a child, she can't. But she's mothering other mothers' children, and again, that's oppositeness of the life that we're living in. Even though they're at each end of the spectrum, they're there, but also we also live together. That we're also meeting in the middle, and those themes are really important for me when I was exploring and crafting Agimat. So thank you for observing those themes.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, I was a bit aware of these Filipino kind of folklore gods and goddesses, which I think it's really interesting because I've never heard of them, and I would have never heard of them if it wasn't because of you. So thank you so much for introducing me to all of these wonderful. I'm now getting more and more curious about anything that has to do with Filipino identity and stories. And I think it's just so exciting when I learn something new about a different country or culture. There's so much wisdom and so many great insights in every single culture that,
Mm.
it's just great. So thank you so much for this gorgeous poem. Now, if you're still okay to read another poem, it would be wonderful to
Yes,
go over the second one. Yeah.
yes, of course. So this poem, because in the book I did mention about we did mention and talk about COVID, right? The war that nurses fought in 2020, but actually there's a second war in in the book that is explored, which is the Japanese occupation in the Philippines that happened during the World War II. And this next poem is nothing about that, but I guess when I was looking into that and developing that, this is when this poem comes in. And I wonder if you've experienced it as well, Erwin. When you were a child, did your Did you experience of capturing a frog for science class?
I never did the frog, but they brought, I think, like a bull's heart or something, and we have to dissect it. It was a bit
Oh,
traumatizing, to be
yes.
which is why I can relate to this poem a
Yeah.
lot. It was so
Oh.
um
Oh no, in the Philippines we had to capture it. We had to catch it.
that's
But
brilliant.
I think that's not a norm anymore. That was like decades ago.
Right.
So
Well, that,
this
that
this
sounds
one,
fun.
well, thank you so much. Thanks, Erwin. So this poem is called "Captured." The class ruptures in screams as an army of frogs leaps over the jar's brim. Sir says, "Do it." My small hands are quick to grab. Its webbed toes flick and twitch in an attempt to flee. But Sir is quick to needle the top of its head and stir the silver steel until it is dazed. The see-through layers on its eyes, which circles nictitating membranes, sweep up and down. We pin its palms onto the board and pinch below the stomach to make a cut, from its abdomen up to its pulsing throat. We forcep its mottled skin aside to reveal the pink, beating flesh. Its lungs inflate, full as balloon vines. Searching for the heart, we slit once more, raking the layers of its guts, the sapphire cabochon of a gallbladder, the supernova of unfertilized yellow eggs. No wonder we are lonely now, following orders without understanding why.
Thank you very much for reading it. It was a very interesting poem, and I have a few questions. Well, first of all, before we go to the final question, which in regards to the ending, which I think it opens up a really important question and conversation. First of all, I want to just, kind of discuss this idea of the class and the frog, when you're dissecting it throughout your entire poetry collection, something I noticed is your skill and ability to really get us the picture of and the action. Like you really get us there, no matter how, let's say, gross or kind of it might be a bit graphic, but it really takes us there. And even though it makes us kind of you know, wince a little bit or kind of flinch because oh, I've never like I'm the type of person that if I see blood or if I see like some open body, I kind of get all I freak out. So seeing this in poetry um had that impression in me, but in a good way because I've never really read anything in poetry that made me that had that impression on me. And I
Mm,
think
mm,
in a way that's a very that says a lot about the skills that you have on bringing these imageries to life.
mm,
It becomes a bit emotional as well because you have to obey what the teacher is saying,
mm,
for example, or when you say, "No wonder we are lonely now, following orders without understanding why." I think that line really wraps up what you wanted to say here in terms of you know, sometimes we do things without really, uh, you know, um, thinking, why do we even do it?
mm,
Why are we dissecting the frog? Why are we catching frogs? Like you're just following orders in a way. So I just
mm,
wanted to ask you with this final quote of "No wonder we are lonely now,
mm.
following orders without understanding why." Could you run us through this line?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, this collection. When I was writing it, it's okay. There's going to be two parallels. A parallel of two wars: COVID war, Japanese occupation, and throughout the collection, there are also some poems there about the atrocity of the Japanese people, the Japanese soldiers towards Filipino, as well as the guerrillas, the Filipino guerrillas hurting. Japanese as well. Um, and in fact, there are quite a few poems here regarding that. So I was I was reflecting on the idea of atrocity and to whom it is imposed and who's doing it, but also who's imposing it. And to be fair, that experience of capturing a frog, I couldn't really, it's not like I could remember every detail of it because we did that back in primary school when we were just like starting science. So when I was crafting this poem, I know that I know that I have to translate something. Although at that time when I was crafting it, I didn't know what I was translating, but I know that I wanted to translate something about that that darkness of the human being, whether that's to an animal or to another. And that darkness is not only, it's not only imposed to us. Yes, we follow orders, but at the same time, ultimately, we are the one who carry it out, right? And I guess that line, no wonder we are lonely now, following orders without understanding why. I feel that it's just, in a way, it's important for me to just say it as it is after all the macabre of the imagery. And again, one thing about imagery as well, even though for me, even though there's that kind of darkness in it, somehow as an artist, I want to showcase it in a beautiful way as well. That's why I call the gallbladder a sapphire cabochon and a supernova of yellow eggs. I feel like it's important to understand that actually, no matter how minuscule we are still a part of this universe, and vice versa. The universe, there's a universe inside us as well. I mean, that's very similar to the Breathe poem about like the universe in the lungs. But I guess it's hard, isn't it? Because sometimes we follow orders and we understand why. Like, I mean, in a surface level, like, obviously we followed orders of capturing a frog and dissecting it because we have to learn. And we know that we can't afford frogs. So we have to capture it. But the heart of it, most most of the time in our lives, that's what we do, right? Even we don't need a momentous moment in order to live it, but we're living it, right? um, I mean, who says that we have to work 5 days a week, on a job that we probably don't love? And who says that we have to like have a child right now because we're in our mid-30s? And again, it's all this expectation, whether that's societal, cultural, even your own value, even what is good for you. It's, you need to do it so that you could be educated, so that you could learn. But even if it's good for you, is it really good for you, right? And this is also reflective of what I was saying about, when we leave, or when time comes, or when time passes, we grieve for the self that we were once, because we always change. And when I left the Philippines, I know I had to leave. But then when I came to the UK, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, there's another world. And even though the West is more liberated than where I came from, actually it makes sense. It makes sense. So when I look back now where I come from, there are values that I really treasure and I still treasure, but I am able to challenge because my views are different now. And I guess a lot of our pain, a lot of our loneliness is not really understanding why we're doing things and for whom we are doing things. And I guess that's really the ultimate the ultimate heart of the poem for me. I can't really explain it so
No, I
eloquently as
couldn't put
much
it
as I
in.
want
Yeah,
to.
I couldn't put it in better words. That was, you know, it is what we are trying to, this universal question. We always ask ourselves this, but without realizing why do we do it? We just take for granted that we have to work, we have to do this, we have to talk to certain people in a certain way, and we have to go to university and then do masters, and then there's always some sort of already made decisions about you. Pretty much, you should know your future and everything, and everything
Yes.
follows a certain pattern. And the dissecting frog that you have in this poem, I think it really, sums up what, I'm pretty sure lots of kids in that class did not want to do that and felt a bit kind of overwhelmed by dissecting a frog, and the same way that I did when I had to dissect a heart. So we all have these different reactions, but in the end, we're taking orders from, in this case, in this poem, was your teacher. But as you said, there's, the same applies for when it comes to a war or in the military. They have to go and, defend their country, but at what cost? If you're taking someone else's life, and in a way you have to be braced to dissect, to kill, to
Yes.
and this kind of very violent, and it's very inhumane in a way. And I think this poem really hints at that, and the way that you enable readers to feel kind of to flinch at these images, it's so powerful, because it allows you to think how you would flinch at looking, for example, at a dead body in front of you, or being like an open body. It's a completely striking imagery, and it just gets you thinking, why do we do this in the first place? Which is why I think ending the poem in that question, just wow, it was for me like exploration of so many, that like a kettle of worms, like a can of worms. It just opens up lots of important questions about our lives, and you start, as you mentioned, you start thinking, why do we work in a 9-to-5 job? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? These questions are very important, and yeah, it just really speaks volumes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for really being so aware of my work. And I guess, again, this comes back from writing from a place like what you were talking a while ago. We write from a place that's important to us. Because I think that, yes, we can venture out, but if something's so important to us and it really calls us, that's the best way. I think that's the easiest way to connect with the readers as well. And it's easy to write a good poem. Oh, it's easy to write a good poem. Like, it's so easy. Well, it's easy to write a good poem, but what's hard is, how do you connect? Because you can, technically, that's a nice poem, that's really like artistic, but 2-3 weeks after, even 2 hours later, would that reader still hold your poem to their heart? And I think that's what I'm hoping to hone, to really connect with my readers, as just like, as a nurse connects to the patient. But thanks for that.
So thank you so much for this lovely conversation, and for reciting your poems, which I find extremely inspiring and insightful. I will definitely go back to them every now and then, and I recommend all of you to go and get yourself a copy of this poetry collection. Which, can you tell us where we can find it?
Yes, I mean, it's available in, if you're in the UK, all bookstores, I think, all national bookstores. But if you're not in the UK, just visit Penguin Random House, and there would be links where it's available. Also from my website, I do ship internationally as well. So if you order from my website, romalynante.com, I do ship internationally. I think it's also on Amazon and Kindle. So I think hopefully it's available where you are, whichever part of the world that you are.
Thank you for listening to the Poetry Lighthouse. If you liked this episode, don't forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. You can also visit our website, thepoetrylighthouse.com, where you can read and submit your works of poetry and short stories. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to keep updated. This is the end of the episode. Thanks again, and see you next time.